on speaker view, that's great. Or if you want to sit with everybody else, keep it on gallery view. And before I start, I just wanted to announce that not this week, but the next 2 weeks, we are going to be focusing really on our meditation practice. We're going to offer guided meditations each day. We won't probably have talks to give, but we might have a variety of different kinds of meditations that will give you the opportunity to really deepen your practice and explore your practice. So I hope you join us. So today, I'm going to talk about non-harming and ethics. Ahinsma is the Pali word that means non-harming. And it's really the underlying intention of all of our teachings and our practice. It's not harming ourselves and not harming others, so that we can live with ease and contentment and even joy. So when Lori last week spoke about how each of us live as part of a community, I began to think about how do we do that skillfully without causing harm to each other. If we want to live happily together, we have to have some shared understanding of how best to get along, right? Some set of shared values to live by. These are ethics, or sila in Buddhism. Everything I Need to Know I learned in kindergarten. Do you remember that book? As soon as we begin to socialize with others, like around the time we go to kindergarten, we begin to learn how to get along and live with each other. That book says, share things, play fair, don't hit, put things back where you found them, and clean up your own mess. They're simple lessons that are instilled at an early age that are foundational, actually, for learning how to live together. They are the basis of our ethics. So as we get older, we might use more sophisticated language. We might see a bit more nuance, but the intentions are similar. The basis for ethical conduct in Buddhism is found in the precepts. And these are 5 suggestions offered by the Buddha to lay people to ensure that they may live harmoniously. And just for perspective, there are up to 32 precepts suggested for monks to follow. So as challenging as you might find these 5, at this moment, at least, I'm pretty glad that I'm not ordained. The first time I was introduced to the precepts was on a retreat. And if you've been on retreat, or if you haven't, generally on the first night, you're asked to commit to follow these guidelines. And the retreat starts this way because safety and trust are so important to the container of the retreat. But they're not just relevant on the cushion. Really, they're relevant for living our lives every single day. My local Sangha here in Vermont meets every morning to recommit and share their intention to try to live by these precepts through the coming day. And they do this day by day. So some of us actually might find a little bit of resistance initially and feel like these precepts amount to being told what to do, being told how to live. But they're not edicts, and they don't start with thou shalt not do something. In Buddhism, there is no source outside ourselves to tell us what to do, to tell us how to be, or to define for us what's right and wrong. All of that comes from inside ourselves. We observe and feel the results of our own behavior. So we might think of these precepts as guideposts. They help us reflect on our actions, our speech, and our thinking so we can live a life that doesn't harm ourselves, doesn't cause suffering to others, and that leads to happiness and freedom. We need these, and the world really needs them too. So let's take a look. The first precept is to refrain from taking life. And this is not killing any living being. So it might mean not eating meat, not killing bugs. You know, there are all these stories of the monks who learned to live with the spiders in their cabins, or not swatting mosquitoes. But it also might be not killing ideas. And it might mean toning down our self-talk, being kind to ourselves instead of being so critical. And if we look even a little more deeply, it might mean considering what products we buy and how they're manufactured, right? Are sustainable practices being used that respect the life of the laborer and the planet? In all of it, it's about, can we hold a reverence for life? And then there's refrain from taking what's not given. So this is not stealing. And it's not stealing material things, but also not stealing ideas. It might be not taking advantage of someone's time and energy when it's not offered to you, or not overusing natural resources. Recognizing our responsibility to the planet itself. Are we taking more than our fair share? And the third precept is refrain from wrong speech. So this is a big one, and it's hard because our minds move so quickly and there's so much going on when we're in conversation. So this includes honoring the truth, refraining from lies, exaggerations, gossip, hurtful and angry speech. And it also might mean speaking up when it's uncomfortable, not being silent when you should speak. The next is refraining from sexual misconduct, non-harming in our sexual relations. Our sexuality is beautiful. It can be a spiritual practice, and it can be the cause of so much pain and violence. It's a really powerful energy full of desire and attachment. And so we try to manage that energy in a way that doesn't do harm. And then the fifth of the precepts is to refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind and can cause heedlessness. It's the heedlessness that's important. Lots of violence can come from the overuse of intoxicants. And it might be due to alcohol or drugs, or really anything else we have an addictive or toxic relationship to. Could be TV, could be our electronics. It might be junk food. We know that addictive behavior clouds our mind. Trying to live by these precepts is part of my practice. I tune into what's happening inside me, and also I'm aware of my impact outside as well, how I'm interacting with the world. So think for a minute. What happens when you take something that wasn't given to you? We've all done it at some point. The example I was told and always remember is imagining waking up early and going to the fridge and drinking the end of the orange juice that you know your partner loves and was looking forward to. What does that feel like? It tasted so good in the moment, but there's a lingering thought that maybe you shouldn't have finished it. It's so simple. We probably all have done something like this. And if you're mindful, you might feel this in your body. I think of it as a ripple that spreads out into your heart and mind. It's like the ripples that form after a stone's been thrown into water. It's uncomfortable. And something in you knows that this wasn't thoughtful or kind. Maybe you can remember a time when you exaggerated, right? Stretch the truth just a little bit. And maybe it was when you were telling a story because it really captured people's attention and it emphasized the point you were trying to make. And maybe it was at someone else's expense. Or maybe there was a time when someone overheard you talking about them, or you got angry and you hurt someone. In each of these examples, I think something in you feels this. Something in you know that you caused pain to someone. And maybe then your mind starts reaching for ways to justify or defend yourself, and your heart area gets tight. These are the ripples again. And so instead of ignoring them, which is what we really want to do, they can help us if we turn towards them. They're kind of like a barometer for those actions of ours that are not too skillful. And if we're mindful, we can learn to refrain from action that causes harm. It can be hard. We all know that. There are a lot of forces at play in our interactions, and they're full of desire and aversion. And we don't always get it right. That's for sure. But we do get it right sometimes. And when we do, it feels different. There's maybe a sense of lightness, a little uplift. Can you feel that or imagine it? When you said just the right thing, or you restrained from saying the wrong thing, or you made a decision to not buy an extra pair of shoes that you really didn't need, or you chose to order a bean dish instead of a steak at the restaurant last night. You know, can you feel how this might align more easily with how you want to live? How your actions move towards non-harming, and you feel lighter. What comes to mind is the title of that movie, The Incredible Lightness of Being. So the Buddha called this the bliss of blamelessness. And from the Dhammapada, the Buddha was asked, and what is the bliss of blamelessness? And he replies, there is the case where the disciple of the Noble One is endowed with blameless bodily action, blameless verbal action, blameless mental action. He experiences bliss. He experiences joy. So this is something to aspire to. And I hate to be a downer, but I question if it's really realistic in the world as it is today. I think it's really hard to be blameless in a world that's as interconnected as we are. You know, if we drive a car, or even say we take public buses because a car causes too much pollution, so our heart's in the right place, where does the rubber for the tires come from? Was the rainforest cut to build a rubber plantation? Or, you know, clearly each of us uses a computer. And it's possible that labor was exploited in order to get the precious metals needed for its component parts. So if we dig deep, we see how the impacts of our actions are so globalized and connected to everything else that it's hard to be blameless. But we can hold it as an aspiration. and we can be conscious of our choices. We can live with our eyes wide open and be as ethical as possible and cause as little harm as possible. And if we get even a glimpse of the potential for joy, this can fuel our practice. So what I want to do in our meditation today is to offer you the words of Thich Nhat Hanh. He has 5 mindfulness practices that are repeated at Plum Village, his community, and they've been modernized for today's world. So really hold them lightly, let them flow over you, and just notice what parts might ring true. And the link will be in the chat, so don't feel like you have to hold on to these words at all. So let's begin by, of course, bringing attention to our bodies and offering them what they need in this moment so that they can sit comfortably, so we can be receptive and awake. And let yourself slowly come into stillness, feeling yourself in this place and in this moment, and settling. Reverence for life. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I am committed to cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion, and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I'm determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, in my thinking or in my way of life. Seeing that harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance, I will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, and dogmatism in myself and in the world. true happiness. Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression, I'm committed to practicing generosity in my thinking, speaking, and acting. I'm determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. And I will share my time, energy, and material resources with those that are in need. I'll practice looking deeply to see that the happiness and suffering of others are not separate from my own happiness and suffering. That true happiness is not possible without understanding and compassion, and that running after wealth, fame, power, and sensual pleasures can bring much suffering and despair. I'm aware that happiness depends on my mental attitude and not on external conditions, and that I can live happily in the present moment simply by remembering that I already have more than enough conditions to be happy. I'm committed to practicing right livelihood so that I can help reduce the suffering of living beings on Earth and stop contributing to climate change. True love. Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I'm committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, family, and society. Knowing that sexual desire is not love and that sexual activity motivated by craving always harms myself as well as others, I'm determined not to engage in sexual relations without mutual consent, true love, and a deep long-term commitment. I resolve to find spiritual support for the integrity of my relationship from family members, friends, and Sangha with whom there is support and trust. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. Seeing that body and mind are interrelated, I'm committed to learn appropriate ways to take care of my sexual energy and to cultivate the 4 basic elements of true love: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and inclusiveness for the greater happiness of myself and others. Recognizing the diversity of human experience, I'm committed not to discriminate against any form of gender identity or sexual orientation. Practicing true love, we know that we will continue beautifully into the future. Loving speech and deep listening. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I'm committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relieve suffering and to promote reconciliation and peace in myself and among other people, ethnic and religious groups, and nations. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I'm committed to speaking truthfully, using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I'm determined not to speak. I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I'm determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain and not to utter words that can cause division or discord. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and fear that lie deep in my consciousness. Nourishment and healing. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I'm committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I'll practice looking deeply into how I consume the 4 kinds of nutriments, namely edible foods, sense impressions, volition, and consciousness. I'm determined not to gamble or to use alcohol, drugs, or any other products which contain toxins, such as certain websites, electronic games, TV programs, films, magazines, books, and conversation. I'll practice coming back to the present moment to be in touch with the refreshing, healing, and nourishing elements in me and around me, not letting regrets and sorrow drag me back into the past, nor letting anxieties, fear, or craving pull me out of the present moment. I'm determined not to try to cover up loneliness, anxiety, or other suffering by losing myself in consumption. I will contemplate inner being and consume in a way that preserves peace, joy, and well-being in my body and consciousness, and in the collective body and consciousness of my family, my society, and the earth.